The knife paused mid-air, hovering above the turkey like it sensed something coming. My mother's voice, clear and clipped, cut sharper than the blade ever could. "We've decided Rachel will get the house, the savings, everything," she said, placing her fork down gently, as if civility might soften the blow. "Leah." That's me. And for a second, I thought I misheard her. The scent of cinnamon and dry pine needles lingered around the room like perfume trying too hard. The mashed potatoes were already cold, untouched. The cranberry sauce congealed in its glass bowl. Across the table, Rachel was swirling her wine slowly, lips curled into something between a smirk and a smile. "You never really wanted to be part of this family anyway," Mom added, stabbing a piece of turkey with unnecessary force. "You've always kept your distance." I didn't speak, not right away. I let it sit, the silence. Let it grow teeth. Rachel took a slow sip, looked at me over the rim of her glass. "Don't act surprised, Leah," she said. "You've been gone for years. You never help." Dad didn't even look up. His attention was fixed on his plate, fork pushing stuffing into a corner like he was trying to disappear inside the food. 3 voices, and none of them were mine. 3 versions of the same message. "You don't matter." Here, I'd flown in from New York, left my shift early, covered for a colleague just to make it. I hadn't slept in 22 hours. The hospital was short-staffed, the ER overflowing, but I came. I always came. Birthdays, anniversaries, the occasional emergency, quietly, without drama, without expectation. The problem is, when you show up without asking for anything, people start to believe you never needed to be there at all. "I see," I said finally, folding my napkin with careful precision. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. "So Rachel gets everything?" "You're doing fine on your own," Mom replied. "You have your career, your apartment, your life. Rachel's here, with us." And there it was, the logic of the entitled. Proximity as proof of devotion, presence as payment, effort irrelevant. I stood up quietly. "Then you won't be needing the automatic deposit I've been sending every month for Dad's prescriptions." Mom blinked. Rachel froze mid-sip. Dad finally looked up. "I'll cancel it tomorrow," I said. "Just so there's no confusion." There was a beat of silence. Then Rachel laughed, short, breathy, triumphant. "Oh my God, seriously? You're going to throw a fit over some money?" I turned to her. "You think this is about money? You're always acting like some kind of savior, Leah. No one asked you to help." That was when it hit me, like a pressure point finally collapsing. They didn't just take me for granted. They had rewritten history. My help was never requested, never acknowledged, just assumed. Built into the wallpaper. Expected, yet resented. Mom looked at me like I was overreacting. "Sweetheart, don't make this ugly." "Ugly?" I echoed. "You just told me I'm not part of this family. I'm not the one making this ugly." There was a soft knock at the door. My cousin Heather, her arms full of grocery bags, stepped in. Late, as usual, but always cheerful. She froze mid-step when she saw the tension, her smile faltering. Happy Thanksgiving?" Rachel stood to greet her, kissing her cheek. "Glad someone still knows how to show up." I watched their interaction closely. Too closely. Something about it felt off. Heather's body language was tight, stiff. She didn't meet my eyes. Later, I would learn that Rachel had called her the night before, drunk and panicking. Not about the dinner, but about the will. That it wasn't finalized. That Mom and Dad hadn't yet signed the legal transfer. Heather was a paralegal. She'd been helping Rachel push them to make it official, but none of that showed yet. Not on the surface. Instead, I looked at Heather's expression. Polite concern. The kind you wear like a mask at funerals. It was enough. I grabbed my coat from the chair and walked toward the door. Rachel snorted. "Oh, here we go. Dramatic. Exit. Table for one." I turned. Calm. Too calm. "No, not dramatic. Just overdue." Mom's voice rose behind me. "Leah, don't do this. We're still your family." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "No," I said. "You're not. You're an institution that profits off my silence." Dad stood now too, finally stepping into the moment. "Be reasonable," he said. I looked at him, really looked. The man who used to sit beside me during my asthma attacks, who once taught me to ride a bike, who stopped talking when Rachel cried because her new iPhone was the wrong color. "Reasonable?" I said. "You all just made a business decision, so I'm doing the same." And I walked out. No shouting, no tears, just the dull, final snap of something breaking after years of strain. I didn't drive back to the hotel. I drove straight to the airport. I booked the first red-eye back to the city. Somewhere between boarding and takeoff, I opened my phone and checked the account. 3 years. That's how long I'd been covering the medical bills, groceries, even the housekeeper. Rachel insisted was for Mom's mental health. Quietly, reliably, like gravity. I opened the bank app. Tap, delete, gone. By the time the plane touched down, my name had vanished from every payment plan. That night, while I showered in silence, I replayed every thankless visit, every time I'd sat through Rachel's casual digs, every time Mom had shifted a compliment just slightly toward my sister. But none of that hurt as much as the memory of last spring, when Dad called me crying because Rachel had maxed out another card and couldn't pay the property tax. And I wired the money from a trip fund I'd been saving for 4 years. He called me his rock that day. Now he couldn't even look at me over turkey. I realized something in that moment. Towel still wrapped around my hair, water dripping onto tile. They didn't cut me out because I failed them. They cut me out because I made them uncomfortable. Because I didn't need them. Because they needed me. And people will always resent what they depend on but can't control. I dried off, lit a candle, and opened my laptop. There was one more thing to cancel. My legal power of attorney over Dad's medical decisions. Let Rachel take it. She wanted everything. She could have it all. The inheritance, the responsibility, the wreckage. Me? I'd take my freedom, and I'd never sit at that table again. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I sat at my kitchen table staring at a bowl of leftover butternut squash soup I had no intention of eating. The city outside was gray, the kind of December that leaches color from everything. My apartment was quiet, no music, no news. Just the ticking of the old wall clock my parents had once gifted me when I got promoted to surgical coordinator. I used to think it was thoughtful. I now saw it for what it was. A bribe, dressed as sentiment. I hadn't spoken to any of them since I walked out that night. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't have to. Silence, when chosen, is its own fortress. But that didn't mean the messages didn't come. The first text was from Mom. A single line, as practiced as it was hollow. "Hope you made it home. Safe. Rachel's taking care of us now." No apology, no acknowledgement, just an erasure, rewritten in real time. Rachel. Of course. I thought back to when we were kids. She'd scream until someone handed her what she wanted. If she didn't get it, she'd cry. But if I cried, Mom called me dramatic. Rachel failed a class? She's creative, not academic. I brought home straight A's? Don't rub it in your sister's face. When she totaled her car at 19, I took out a loan to replace it. When I asked her to pay me back, she blocked me for 6 months and told everyone I was obsessed with money. The most brilliant trick they ever pulled was convincing me that doing everything for them was my way of being included. When Rachel forgot birthdays, it was fine. She was busy. When I missed one family dinner because of a night shift at the hospital, I was distancing myself. I learned early that the punishment for independence was guilt. They called me the ghost, the outsider, the daughter who left. But they never said why I left. They left that part out. I was 8 when I learned the difference between noise and worth. Rachel had a fever, 101 degrees. Mom fussed, Dad canceled. A meeting, the world spun on her axis. A week later, I had bronchitis. I stayed in bed with tissues and orange juice and my Game Boy, alone. The only time anyone checked on me was when they needed to grab laundry from my room. But none of that mattered now, because now, in their version of history, Rachel was the one who stayed, who helped, who cared. My phone buzzed. This time, a voicemail. It was Dad. "Leah, hey, just checking in. Your mother says we should give you space, but, well, you know, how it is. Just remember you always have a place here, kiddo." I listened twice. He sounded sincere. The kind of sincerity that masks something else, something sharp beneath the softness. Then I remembered. Last year, I'd found a note tucked into the mail Mom accidentally forwarded to my apartment. It was from a financial advisor. The handwriting was Rachel's. The note said, "Once it's transferred, we'll be set. She's too busy to care." It had been clipped to a printed draft of a living trust. I never told them I saw it. I filed it away, unsure if I was imagining things. Now I wasn't. I picked up the soup, dumped it in the sink. The silence of the apartment wasn't heavy anymore. It was precise, chosen. That weekend, I went through my bank records, line by line. What started as a review turned into an audit. In 3 years, I'd sent them over $64,000. Medical bills, mortgage help, emergency repairs, groceries, some payments were scheduled through auto debits I barely remembered authorizing. But the worst part? Most of those payments didn't go to their accounts. They went to Rachel's. That was the first snap in the thread. The unraveling began fast after that. I called the hospital billing department Dad used for his last procedure. Quietly, impersonally. "I'm checking for a relative," I said. "Was this balance ever settled?" "Yes," the woman said. "Paid in full, in cash, 3 days before the procedure." That didn't make sense. I remembered sending $7,500 for it. "Could you tell me who paid?" A pause. "Rachel Miller." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I pulled up my email chain with Mom from around that time. There it was. "We're short on Dad's surgery. Can you help?" Rachel's tapped out. Tapped out. But she had used my money to pay the hospital and then told Mom she had it covered. Played the savior with my check. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just favoritism. It was theft. Strategic, intentional, quiet theft. And I had been complicit by staying silent. I didn't tell anyone what I'd discovered. Not yet. I wanted to see how far they would go. On Monday, Rachel finally called. No answer. "Shocking," she said in her voicemail, a smug laugh buried under the sarcasm. "So you're really ignoring Mom and Dad now? Over money?" "Honestly, Leah, it's gross. They're your parents. Try acting like it. No apology, no curiosity, just accusation." I didn't return the call. Instead, I called the accountant they used, Kevin. He had worked with Dad for years. I asked about the trust. He paused. "Rachel told me you were backing away," he said. "Said you didn't want the responsibility." "She told you that?" "She had paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" He hesitated. "A letter, signed, with your name. You gave up your share." I nearly dropped the phone. "I never signed anything," I said. Kevin's voice dropped. "Leah, are you saying the letter's fake?" "No," I said slowly. I'm saying it's the first I've heard of it. When we hung up, my hands were cold. Not from fear. From clarity. I pulled out the document I'd stored months ago, the one Heather had dropped in conversation by accident, a revised draft of the trust, dated 2 months before Thanksgiving. Rachel had planned this. Rachel had forged this. Rachel had used my money, my silence, and my absence to crown herself the one who cared, and I had let her. Not anymore. They saw me as the ghost. I was about to haunt every lie they'd ever told themselves. 2 weeks passed, not a single call from Mom, not a text, not a trace of the woman who used to send me daily forwarded prayers, inspirational quotes with clip art angels, and guilt-laced Bible verses about honoring thy parents. The silence wasn't relief, it was preparation. When my family goes quiet, it's never an end. It's a reset. They were regrouping. The first break came on a Wednesday night. I was walking home from the hospital, coat zipped up to my throat, gloves shoved deep in my pockets. The city lights blurred against the fog as I passed by a bakery I used to love but hadn't entered in months. My phone vibrated. The name on the screen stopped me in my tracks. Rachel. I let it go to voicemail. Less than a minute later, another call, then a third. By the fourth, I picked up. You're seriously going to ghost everyone now? She snapped before I could say anything. It's been 2 weeks, Leah. Grow up. I didn't answer. I let the pause hang. Silence is uncomfortable for people like Rachel. They fill it with noise. Confession, defensiveness, mistakes. You're acting like a martyr, she continued. They just made a decision. It's not personal. They gave everything to you. Because I'm here. I stayed. You left. You always leave. And yet, I'm the one who paid for everything they needed, I said evenly. Every surgery, every repair, every bill you forgot existed until the lights flickered, she scoffed. You act like that makes you better. No, I said. It made me useful. You just made sure it didn't make me loved. Her silence cracked then, a soft exhale giving her away. You think this is about love? She whispered. You really think they love me more? And there it was. The first true thing she'd said in years, because even she didn't believe, the fantasy she lived in. She didn't need love. She needed leverage. She always had. I hung up. That night, I pulled out a manila folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside, every email from the estate attorney, every scanned copy of the trust drafts I had been CC'd on before Rachel took control. One email in particular made my stomach turn, a message from Mom to their attorney, dated 4 months earlier. Please remove Leah from the list of beneficiaries. She's made it clear she wants nothing to do with this family. No such conversation had ever happened. I closed the laptop. 3 days later, a package arrived at my apartment. No sender. Listed. Just a neat handwritten note on top of a stack of paperwork. Mom wanted you to see the updated will. For your peace of mind. The letter was signed Rachel. The signature was a mirror of Mom's cursive. Too perfect. Too practiced. I didn't touch the documents. I took them straight to a contact at the hospital. A nurse I trusted, whose wife worked in forensic handwriting analysis. 2 days later, she sent me a picture of the report. Signature likely forged. High probability of replication. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the report until the letters stopped making sense. Rachel hadn't just manipulated the narrative. She had manipulated the law, and Mom had let her. That weekend, I flew back, not to visit but to verify. I didn't tell them I was coming. I rented a car, parked it 3 blocks down, sat outside the house I used to call home and watched. Rachel was there, her car in the driveway, carrying groceries inside, not just visiting, living. The room that used to be mine now had pink curtains. a yoga mat in the window. She had moved in. I stayed long enough to see her let herself in with a key, and I realized this wasn't a shift. This had been planned. Long before Thanksgiving. She hadn't just inherited the estate. She had absorbed it. Mom and Dad had let it happen. That night, I stayed in a motel on the outskirts of town. Cold sheets, thin walls, the hum of broken vending machines. I barely slept. At sunrise, I drove past the lawyer's office Dad had always used. It was closed, but I knew someone inside. I'd babysat the paralegal's kids during college. Her name was Erin. I called. Her! She agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a coffee shop where they still served cream in glass pitchers and laminated menus. I'm off the record, she warned. Of course. She sipped her drink, then looked me in the eye. They've changed everything, Leah. Months ago, Rachel said you formally removed yourself, that it was your decision, that you didn't want the liability. What liability? She hesitated. The mortgage, the debts. They've borrowed heavily against the estate. Second mortgage, reverse equity loan, and a personal loan tied to the house. You were listed on the original structure. Removing you was the only way they could proceed. The fog lifted. Rachel hadn't wanted the house. She'd wanted the cash. She'd sold off pieces of the estate like a butcher carving meat, and in order to do it, she had to make me disappear. They didn't cut me out because I was distant. They cut me out because I was a threat. I left the coffee shop without finishing my drink. My hands were steady. My thoughts were not. Back in the motel, I drafted one email. To the estate attorney, just one sentence. I never signed a release of liability. I demand a copy of the document you have on file. The reply came within 6 hours. We will be in touch pending internal verification. The verification would never come because the signature would never hold. Rachel had turned inheritance into a weapon. But she'd forgotten something. I was the one who taught her how to aim. The house was listed online the first week of March. I didn't find out from Mom, not from Rachel. Not even through the lawyer's office, where I'd quietly submitted a dispute over the forged release they still hadn't responded to. No. I found out because a colleague at the hospital, a real estate hobbyist, forwarded me the Zillow link. You said you were from West Haven, right? The message read. Thought this looked familiar. Wild price drop. What happened? I clicked the link. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, brick colonial, the house I grew up in, staged furniture, Rachel's. Yoga mat gone. The photos were carefully angled to hide the cracks in the foundation, the water damage in the guest bathroom, the ceiling tiles I'd paid to replace after the last winter storm had torn through the roof. They had put it up for sale. No one told. I closed my laptop and stared out the window, down at the street below, where people moved through their lives carrying groceries, coffee, dogs, hand-holding, and small talk. I wondered what it felt like to have a family that told you the truth before the world did. The next day, I drove down. No announcement. No warning. This time, I didn't stay in a motel. I stayed with Uncle Jerry. He hadn't spoken to my mother. In over a year, something about a loan, an argument, a refusal to co-sign something for Rachel. She stopped calling after I said no, he told me when I showed up at his door. Same way she always does. Jerry had always been the strange limb of the family tree. Too blunt, too private, too unwilling to fall in line. I used to think he just didn't like people. Now I understood. He didn't like being used. He poured me a drink, sat across from me. No questions, no judgment. When I told him about the forged paperwork, he didn't flinch. She did the same thing to me, he said. Asked me to sign a blank grant deed. Said it was for a refinance. I refused. 2 weeks later, she told everyone I'd abandoned the family. She? Your mother, he said simply. I blinked. It had always been Rachel. Rachel, the manipulator. Rachel, the orchestrator. But Jerry wasn't talking about Rachel. He was talking about Mom. The realization came slowly, like a rope tightening, around my chest. Rachel wasn't acting alone. She was acting within permission. Direction, even. She's the favorite, Jerry said. But she's not the mastermind. Never has been. He pulled out a box from the closet. Old letters, photos, financial records. Among them, copies of emails from years ago. My mother, pressuring Jerry to sign over part of their parents' estate. Passive-aggressive notes. Emotional blackmail buried under pleasantries. This has always been her game, Jerry said. She isolates. She rewards loyalty with access. She punishes doubt with exile. Rachel just learned the tactics. I felt sick, because I hadn't seen it. Not fully. I'd always painted Mom as complicit, maybe misguided, always pulled between her daughters. But no. She had never been pulled. She had been steering the entire time. I thought back to the Thanksgiving dinner, the performative calm, the fork laid down with theatrical grace, the way she said, "Rachel's here, with us. Not Rachel deserves it. Not Rachel's. Sacrificed for us. Just proximity. Control. It wasn't about worth. It was about closeness. Obedience." That night, I parked 2 streets down from the house and watched from the shadows as Rachel hauled a box into the trunk of her car. She was moving out. Not by choice. She was being forced out. The sale wasn't to upgrade, it was to escape. They were underwater, the second mortgage, the loans, the fake solvency built on fake signatures. It was all catching up. I drove back to Jerry's, in silence. The next morning, I got a message. From Dad. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly since Thanksgiving. "We're sorry, Leah. We didn't realize how much you were handling. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. No mention of the house. No mention of the fraud. No ownership. Just carefully chosen wording. Didn't realize. The language of denial. The language of strategy. I didn't answer. Later that afternoon, I got a call. From a local property agent. "Hi, Ms. Miller. I'm reaching out because your name was previously associated with the deed at 74 Willow Lane. We're in escrow now and need clarity on one point before closing." I cut her off. I was removed. "Without consent," I said. "You'll be hearing from my legal representative." She hesitated. "You're saying you weren't part of the transfer?" "No, I'm saying I was erased." She apologized. I hung up. That night, Mom called. I let it ring. Then I played the voicemail. "Leah, honey. I know things have been tense, but I want you to understand. We did what we thought was best. Rachel needed stability. She's always struggled more than you. You're strong. You always land on your feet." I listened twice. Once as a daughter. Then again, as a woman no longer. Playing that role. They didn't help Rachel because she was weak. They helped her because she was malleable. I was too stable to control. So they cut me out. You don't keep the net under the acrobat who's already landed. You cut it from beneath her to keep her from climbing higher. The next morning, I emailed a probate lawyer, attached the report from the handwriting expert, attached the real documents, attached a message. I'd like to initiate a formal investigation into the fraudulent revision of a family trust and unauthorized removal from an estate. It was quiet, strategic, cold, like they had taught me, and it was just the beginning. It was raining when Rachel showed up at my apartment. No warning, no text, just the dull, insistent buzz of the intercom at 10:43 p.m., followed by the grainy camera. Feed of her face staring up from the lobby like she owned the building. I didn't buzz her in. She got in anyway. The knock on my door wasn't tentative. It was sharp, rehearsed. I opened it slowly, already knowing she wouldn't come alone. She brought the storm in with her. "You've made your point," she said before I could speak, tossing her soaked coat on the back of the chair like she lived there. "Congratulations." I said nothing. I watched her, wet hair clinging to her cheeks, mascara trailing under one eye, eyes bloodshot but not from crying, from panic. "They're falling apart, Leah," she said. "You've proven whatever it is you needed to prove. They're behind on everything. You should have thought of that before you forged my name on a legal document," I said flatly. Rachel didn't deny it. That was her tell. She only got defensive when she had a leg to stand on. "They're our parents," she said instead, slowly, like I needed reminding. "You're really going to let them drown?" "They were never drowning," I replied. "They were floating, on me. I just let go of the rope." Rachel took a breath, and for a moment I thought she was going to cry. But instead, she laughed. "God, you always talk like you're in a courtroom." I moved past her and picked up her coat, held it out. "You came here for something. Say it." She didn't take the coat. "They can't pay the hospital bill," she said. "Dad needs another scan, and they've maxed everything. Mom's considering selling what's left of Grandma's jewelry." I didn't move. "And?" I asked. She stepped closer. "I know things got messed up, but you're still the one who can fix it." There it was. The pitch. The illusion of unity. "Let me guess," I said. "You want me to make the payments anonymously, so they don't have to know it was me. That way, Mom gets to keep pretending she was right." She blinked. Just once. "Leah," she said carefully, "this isn't about pride. This is about survival." I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. She didn't follow, took one sip and placed the glass down harder than necessary. Then I turned to face her. "You want to survive?" I asked. "Start by moving out of the condo you leased with Dad's name, the one you told the landlord you owned." Her mouth parted, but no words came. Yes, I knew. The bank statements Uncle Jerry had helped me obtain weren't just damning. They were illuminating. The condo in question, leased under a joint signature, Dad's name and Rachel's handwriting. But the signature on Dad's part didn't match any other legal document I'd seen in 20 years. And the deposit? Transferred from an account I'd once used to wire emergency funds, one I thought had been closed. Rachel had kept the routing number. "You used my money to play landlord," I said coldly. "Then you used Dad's name to make it stick, and when it all started to collapse, you came here, hoping I'd sweep it up again." Rachel sat down, finally rattled. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She adjusted her shirt, straightened her posture. "Do you think I wanted this?" she said. "You left. You always left. You made your money, built your little life, and abandoned. The people who raised you." "The people who raised me," I repeated. "You mean the people who called me ungrateful for sending too little when I couldn't cover the full mortgage?" Rachel stood. "You've always played the victim. And you've always played the mirror," I said. "Reflecting what you thought people wanted so you could get what you needed. You didn't call me for Dad. You called me because this time the lies aren't holding." She moved toward the door but didn't open it. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "I talked to Mom," she said. "She said if you help cover the bills this once, she'll add you back into the trust." I froze. It wasn't the offer. It was the trap. "She told you to say that?" I asked. "She said it would mean something to you." She lied. Rachel paused, confused. "About what?" "There is no trust," I said. "You already liquidated it." And now her face changed. The first real crack. Her eyes widened, her breath hitching, because she thought she was still holding a card. But I already knew the deck was ash. I walked to the door and opened it. "She gave you nothing," I said. But the illusion of power. And you played her. Game like a good little heir. Now the pieces are gone and you're still waiting for the crown. Rachel didn't move. You can't just walk away from this, she said finally. I didn't flinch. I already did. As she walked down the hallway, she turned back once. You think you're better than us? She spat. No, I said. I just stopped being worse to myself. When the door closed, I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. She wouldn't be back, because she didn't come to ask. She came to manipulate, and I hadn't given her the opening. Not this time. The call came just before dawn, the hour when exhaustion becomes a second skin and silence feels almost sacred. I had just scrubbed out of a 12-hour shift, my hands raw from sanitizing, my mind numb from trauma after trauma. The phone buzzed twice before I answered. Dad's voice was quiet, too composed. Your mom's not doing well. I didn't ask what he meant. I knew what he wanted me to hear. Urgency without responsibility. Concern without confession. She's tired, he said. Worn down. This whole thing with the house. You sold the house, I corrected. You drained your accounts. You signed over everything to Rachel. That was a choice, not a consequence. He didn't argue. Instead, he sighed. We weren't fair to you, he said, with a tone that sounded practiced, like someone had told him exactly how to phrase it. I waited. Then he added, but Rachel's trying. I almost laughed. It bubbled up in the back of my throat, bitter and sharp, but I swallowed it. He wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to negotiate. I'll visit when my schedule allows, I said, and hung up. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a decade. I went back to my childhood room. The house was mostly empty now, furniture boxed, walls stripped, bare. Rachel's car was gone, a for rent sign staked in the yard like a white flag no one wanted to admit they'd raised. The bedroom door creaked open like it remembered me. Inside, the air still held the scent of old wood and forgotten dreams. My bookshelf was gone, the one I'd spent summers building. In its place was a stack of unopened boxes labeled Misk, Leah, not even worth sorting. I sat on the floor, knees drawn up, and let my eyes wander. Then I noticed it, a stack of mail beneath the old vanity, half shoved, half hidden. Junk mail mostly. But one envelope caught my eye. Thick, cream-colored. From the hospital where Mom had been treated after her last fall. I opened it. It was an updated emergency contact form. Dated 3 months ago. The name listed? Rachel Miller, only. Rachel. No secondary. No alternates. There used to be 2 names, mine and Mom's own backup. They had removed me. I checked the signature. Not Mom's. It was a near-perfect replica, but not hers. The loops in the L's were too wide, the pressure inconsistent. I knew. Because I'd studied those curves my whole life. This wasn't negligence, it was erasure. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't leave. I sat in that empty room and made a list. Every payment. Every wire transfer. Every time I covered for them without acknowledgement. It was longer than I remembered. And then, one by one, I highlighted the patterns. Not just Rachel's theft, but Mom's. Silence. Dad's approval through inaction. Each step wasn't a betrayal in itself, but together, they were a blueprint. They didn't break me suddenly. They starved me slowly. At 3:12 a.m., my phone vibrated again. Rachel, I let it go to voicemail, then listened. Mom's asking for you, she said. She wants to see you. Please. I stared at the screen, then played it again. There was no urgency, no apology, just performance. And something felt off. The next day, I called the hospital. Directly? I didn't say who I was. I just asked if there had been any recent visits under Mom's name. The receptionist hesitated. I'm sorry, but her file was flagged for unusual activity and locked from general access. Unusual how? Someone changed her insurance and emergency information manually last week. Admin's reviewing it. Are you? I hung up. They'd locked it because of a fraud flag. Rachel hadn't just removed me. She had overridden me. Used Mom's name to file a new insurance claim, one that required a medical power of attorney, something I used to hold until last year, when Mom casually told me over coffee, "We transferred it to Rachel. You're so far away, honey. It's just easier." I had smiled, nodded, let it slide. A small detail. An irrelevant legal move. That's what I told myself. Now it was the knife. They used to cut me out of every decision. I drove back to the city that night. My hands didn't shake. My breathing didn't falter. I'd crossed a threshold. One I wouldn't return from. This wasn't just about money or inheritance or favoritism. This was about control, about narrative, about rewriting the history of a family so thoroughly that the one who carried it gets erased from the final chapter. They wanted me gone without the mess of exile. They wanted my silence without the cost of decency. But I was done being polite. That week, I filed a motion with the hospital's legal department. I attached copies of old medical power of attorney forms, texts confirming Mom's wishes to keep me listed, and a copy of Rachel's signature from the lease she forged. The review would take time, but it was already in motion. The next time Rachel tried to speak for Mom, she'd hit a wall she hadn't built herself, and when Mom realized what happened, she'd know exactly who put it there, because love doesn't look like obedience, and family doesn't mean blind forgiveness, not anymore. It was the first quiet Saturday in months. I had no shifts, no emails, no fires to put out. The city outside moved like it didn't know I existed, and for once I didn't feel the need to catch up. I sat on my balcony with coffee and silence, until my phone buzzed with a message that cut through the calm like a blade. "We need to talk." Mom. Just that. 4 words. No hello, no warmth. Not even the performative sweetness she used when she wanted something but was still pretending she didn't. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another buzz. "Please, your father's upset. This has gone on long enough." Gone on like it was a tantrum. Not betrayal. Not erasure. Just an inconvenience that needed to pass so we could all move on as if nothing had happened. I closed my phone, went inside, started laundry. But the buzz didn't stop. By noon, it turned into a call. I answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was thick with false affection. "Leah, sweetheart." I said nothing. She sighed like a woman wronged. "You can't keep punishing us like this." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said calmly. "I'm simply not saving you anymore." Her voice changed immediately. Less mother, more negotiator. "We made mistakes. We know that. But this silence. It's cruel." "You cut me out," I said. "Then you rewrote the story to make it sound justified. Now that the consequences are here, you call it cruelty." There was a pause. Then came the pivot. "I don't know what Rachel told you." "She didn't have to tell me anything," I interrupted. "I saw the insurance forms. I saw the fake emergency contact. I saw the trust paperwork. You signed your name on things you never read. Didn't you?" Silence. "Or maybe you did," I added. "Maybe you knew exactly what she was doing. Maybe letting Rachel erase me was easier than confronting what you built." "Leah," she said, her voice cracking now. I was trying to keep the peace. "There was never peace," I replied. "Only silence. And silence doesn't mean peace. It means someone's being buried." I hung up. An hour later, Dad called. He never called directly. He always let Mom speak for both of them. So when his name appeared, I knew something had shifted. I answered. You're being stubborn. He said, not hello, not how are you, just that. I didn't flinch. You're angry, he continued, but this isn't the way. Isn't it? I asked. Because silence was your way for years. You watched all of it. The favoritism, the manipulation, the lies. You watched her take, and you stayed quiet. You knew I was the one keeping this family afloat, and you let them convince me I was a stranger. You're being selfish. There it was, the old script. I exhaled slowly. If saying no to being used makes me selfish, then I've been too generous for too long. You'll regret this. No, I said. I regret staying quiet for as long as I did. That night, I opened a folder on my desktop I had avoided for weeks. Inside were the results of the hospital's internal review. The forgery had been confirmed. Rachel had submitted false documents on Mom's behalf, claimed to have power of attorney, claimed I had removed myself. She didn't know I'd requested the findings. She didn't know her signature was flagged for investigation. But I did. I was already preparing the next step. Then came the knock at my door. Not Rachel. Mom. Her coat was too thin for the wind. Her hands clutched a grocery store bag like she didn't know how to be empty-handed. I just want to talk, she said when I opened the door. I didn't invite her in. She stepped back, a little, reading the message in my posture. I raised you, she whispered. You raised me to feel replaceable. That's not true. You taught me my worth only existed in what I gave, not in who I was, not in what I needed. She reached into the bag and pulled out a photo album. Look, she said, holding it out like a peace offering. Remember? This? I glanced at the cover. Our family trip to Maine. The one where Rachel got food poisoning and ruined the entire week. The one where I'd spent 3 days helping Dad clean the rental after Mom had a meltdown and refused to lift a finger. You brought this to prove what? I asked. That we're still family? No, I said. You brought it to guilt me. Again. She didn't deny it. You could have stopped this, I continued. You saw her cross lines. You saw her forge, steal, lie, and you let her. You let her because it was easier than challenging the daughter who made you feel adored, who needed you more. She needed help. So did I said. The difference is, I never made you beg. I just did it quietly. And you mistook that for distance. She lowered the album. You think you're better than us now. No, I said. I finally stopped thinking I was worse. She stepped back. This is going to destroy us. Then maybe it needs to, I said, and closed the door. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd already cried the day they told me I wasn't part of their future. Everything since had been strategy, control, clarity. They saw my boundaries as betrayal, because they believed my silence was agreement. It never was. It was survival. Now, it was over. The knock came just after midnight, not frantic, not soft, calculated. I knew it was her before I opened the door. There was a rhythm to Rachel's entitlement. Even her desperation had structure. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked in like it was still her house, like my boundary was just another piece of furniture she could rearrange. You could have answered your phone, she said. I closed the door behind her but said nothing. She turned to face me, arms crossed, tightly. Mom's in the hospital. I looked at her, face blank. And? And you're a doctor. That's not an answer. Her eyes narrowed. Are you really going to play this game? No, I said. I've just stopped playing yours. She dropped her arms and let out a breath that tried to pass for relief but landed closer to exasperation. Look, this isn't about what happened. Mom's not doing well. They had to run more scans. She's scared. She's asking for you. She's asking for the version of me who didn't know better. Rachel flinched at that, just barely, but it was enough. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, thick, cream-colored, not addressed. I didn't take it. What is it? Proof, she said too quickly. That she was going to put you back in the trust, that she regretted it, that she wanted to make things right. I still didn't move. So why hasn't she? I asked. Rachel hesitated. That pause, the slight hitch in her breath, was louder than anything she could say. She was waiting for the right moment, she offered. No, I said. She was waiting for the right leverage. Silence stretched between us like a noose. You know, Rachel said suddenly, quieter now, when we were kids, Mom used to say you were too sensitive to handle the world. She was right, I replied. The world never hurt me the way she did. Her face tightened. But she wasn't here to fight. She was here because she had no moves left. She's scared, Rachel said again, softer this time. Really scared. She asked for you. You said that already. Rachel moved toward the kitchen, pretending like she belonged in my space. She ran her hand along the edge of the counter, like she was measuring something. Or maybe remembering something. She's in room 413, she said. West Wing. You could just stop by. You don't have to say anything. Just let her know you're there. I watched her carefully. Not her words, her body. And then I realized it. She was stalling. She hadn't come to inform me. She came to make... Sure, I wouldn't go. What did you do? I asked. She blinked. What are you talking about? I filed a formal objection to the forged documents. The hospital started a review. The moment they find out about the insurance fraud, about the fake POA, you and Mom lose access. She said nothing. They locked her file, didn't they? I continued. That's why she's scared. Not because she's dying, because the system she built is collapsing. Rachel turned away. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I said. She's not asking for me. She's trying to stop the fallout. Rachel's silence confirmed everything I already knew. Cross the room, open the door. Get out! You can't just walk away from your family. I looked her in the eye. That's not what I'm doing. I'm watching my family walk away from me, over and over, and finally deciding not to follow. She stood still, the envelope still in her hand. You'll regret this, she said again. No, I said. You will. She left, and for the first time, the door didn't feel like a barrier. It felt like protection. I didn't go to the hospital. Not the next day. Not the day after that. I didn't call. I didn't check. Because I finally understood. My presence had always been currency to them. And now that I'd taken it back, they couldn't buy their way out. That week, the hospital confirmed their findings. The power of attorney documents were invalid. The insurance information had been altered. A fraud report was opened. They were locked out of the system. All decisions reverted to emergency protocol, no next of kin, no automatic access. I didn't claim it. I let the system hold them at the same distance they once demanded I keep. And still, the calls came. Mom, Dad, Rachel. Voicemails layered with rehearsed fear, guilt, appeal. But none of them said the one thing I had waited my entire life to hear. I'm sorry, and I was wrong. That was all it would have taken once. Not anymore. Uncle Jerry texted me 3 days later. They called me, wanted me to intervene. I told them they made their bed. I replied with 2 words, thank you. Because Jerry, of all people, had seen it clearest. What looked like rebellion was really self-rescue. What looked like coldness was really clarity, and what they called betrayal was the first act of self-loyalty I'd ever committed. It ended in a way I never expected, with silence. Not the weaponized kind they used to keep me in line, Not the heavy, punishing quiet that fills a house after a slammed door. No, this silence was something else. It was mine, and it was peace. 3 weeks had passed since Rachel's last visit, since Mom's last voicemail, since Dad's last weak attempt at shame, buried under half-hearted fatherly concern. No more envelopes, no more empty pleas disguised as olive branches. When systems collapse, even the most persistent manipulators know when to retreat. Or perhaps, more accurately, when they've been cornered. I didn't go back to the hospital. Not when the inquiry wrapped. Not when the trust was formally dismantled. Not even when Rachel's forged documents led to a suspension of their insurance access and a pending investigation. I didn't revel in it. But I didn't grieve either. Uncle Jerry called just once. "You okay?" "I am," I said. And for the first time in years, it was true. I didn't celebrate by booking a flight or buying something I'd denied myself for years. I celebrated by deleting the last recurring payment still draining from my account, an automatic transfer I hadn't realized was still covering their internet bill. It was $10 a month. It wasn't about the amount. It was about the chain. That was the final link. And when I removed it, I felt something break loose in my chest. Something that had wrapped itself around my spine since I was old enough to recognize conditional love. After that, things began to change quickly, quietly, authentically. I started cooking again. Not just survival meals between shifts, but real cooking. Spices I hadn't used in years, ingredients that didn't come from boxes. I took long walks without watching the time. I reconnected with colleagues who had once invited me to gatherings I always skipped because family needed me. I began looking at apartments, not because I had to move, but because I could. Because I had choice now. Agency. Space. One night, I sat down at my desk and pulled out an old photo, one from when I was 9, standing in front of the fireplace at Christmas. Rachel beside me, beaming with presents. Me, holding a sweater 2 sizes too big and smiling because Mom told me I should be grateful someone thought of me at all. I looked at that child and didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. She had known the truth even then. She just didn't have the language to name it. I whispered to her, "You weren't invisible. You were just inconvenient." I let the photo fall back into the drawer, and I closed it, for good, because this was never about revenge. It was about release. People often ask, "Don't you miss them?" Here's the truth. I don't miss being used. I don't miss the weight of keeping. Other people's lies functional. I don't miss shrinking myself so someone else could feel bigger. They called it family. But it was really a structure, a system that demanded my sacrifice and called it love. I didn't lose a family. I escaped. A system, and in doing so, I built something new, something better, a life that answers only to truth, a life that requires no permission, a life that is mine. To those watching who feel like Leah, maybe you're the dependable one. The one who stays quiet. The one who pays the bills, covers the gaps, smooths over the chaos, and gets called selfish when you finally say no. I want to tell you something no one told me soon enough. You are not wrong for protecting your peace. You are not cruel for setting limits. You are not ungrateful for wanting mutual respect. The people who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries betrayal. Let them. You don't owe anyone your life just because you share their name. What you owe, what you deserve, is your own freedom. And sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is simply stop participating. So if this story felt familiar, if it cracked something open inside you, I hope you carry one thing with you when this video ends. You are not alone, and walking away doesn't make you heartless. It means, finally, you've remembered where your heart belongs. To you. If you found this story powerful, real, or too close to home, subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories coming, and you help others feel seen. See you in the next one.